So, and we are recording. So let's go right into Sepharia and take a look at no, that's not it. Here we are, Psalm 6. Right? I suggested to you a number of Psalms to look at. So if you looked at them before, well and good, and if not, you'll see it here. Right? There are a number of different types of Psalm. So just wanted you to be acquainted with a few short ones and one or two slightly longer ones. Right? So here's Psalm 6. Now this one starts out kind of like with fear and trembling. Oh Lord, do not punish me in anger. Do not chastise me in fury. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I languish. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones shake with terror. My whole being is stricken with terror. You, Lord, oh, how long? Oh Lord, turn, rescue me. Deliver me as befits your faithfulness. For there's no praise of you among the dead. In Sheol, who can acclaim you? Sheol is like that underground, that everybody winds up in. I am weary.
Rabbi, we can't see anything on your screen sharing. I can't anyway.
No.
Maybe
Why
it
is my screen share paused?
Yeah, it just says Danny Horwitz is starting screen sharing, but
yeah, that's all it says.
that's all it says.
Oh, now we have the lunch menu?
No.
Would
Let's try it again. How's that? Can you see it now?
yeah.
Can you
All right.
zoom it
Yes,
larger?
yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, can you make it a little
I can only
larger?
see what I can see. I can't always see what you can see.
Right.
Okay, that's
Can
fine.
you enlarge the screen size? The font is about a size 2.
Ashley, do you know how to do that?
Yes. Are you on a Mac or a Windows?
Windows.
You can usually hit Control plus as long as you're clicked within the window, and it will zoom in.
Okay, that did not work.
The other thing you can do is it looks like right below the X where those 3 lines are, you
Yes.
might have the opportunity, if you click on that option below, like at the top of the screen, like the top right.
The top right?
Of the window. It looks like you have other bookmarks, and then there's 3 little lines above that.
Yes.
If you click on that, you might be able to zoom in. Yep, it's the go back. And it's right below, like in the second to last, you have exit, help, more tools, settings, zoom. Going from the bottom up. Go up, settings.
I see. Okay.
There we go, that's great.
How's
Better.
that?
Perfect.
Everybody like that?
Yes, yes, that's great, thank you.
Okay, good. All right. All right. So the first few verses of this, it's terror, right? And it's like, this guy is dying. Yeah. God, you're going to let me die? I can't praise you if I'm in Sheol, right? In the nether world. I am weary with groaning. Every night I drench my bed. I'm sweating out everything. I melt my couch in tears. I'm crying. My eyes are wasted by vexation, worn out because of all my foes. Away from me, all you evildoers, For the Lord heeds the sound of my weeping. The Lord heeds my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be frustrated and stricken with terror. They will turn back in an instant, frustrated. So we had a big switch and, towards the end here, didn't we? Okay. So this psalm starts with an experience of despair. And then at the end, it seems there's this triumphant moment of deliverance. Right? Sometimes the Psalms fluctuate like this, the extreme mood swing of someone who's in terrible trouble. Either they're very sick, or they're surrounded by enemies, or they're indicted by a grand jury for something they didn't do, right? Well, that happens too, right? So, and then God comes through, or so it seems to that person. They have a deliverance, and they attribute it to God because all things come from God. Comments or questions about this particular psalm?
Well, the attitude towards God, or the person writing this, is in terror and is beseeching God to rescue them. But I almost get the thing that he's frightened of God.
Because maybe God is doing this to him. Maybe God is has his agents in all these people or these things that are out to get him. Yeah. Now, sometimes the Psalms have bad theology, right? Sometimes, people do that. They say, well, this must be coming from God. Can you imagine what that would be like if I took that kind of theology into a hospital room? Oh, whatever you've got, it must be because God wants you to have it, right? They'd probably throw me out, right? That would be one way to get them up. No, but it's, it may be somebody's experience of life. You just have to be aware that it's not always good theology, right? To say all things come from God, right? You don't want to tell that to everyone at every time, right? The psalmist does say the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, but that's different. That's about, all the blessings there are in the earth that are theirs for the taking, right? Okay, other reactions or questions about this kind of experience? All right, let's take the next one. This is Psalm 27, which, if it sounds familiar, it's because we say it every morning and every evening in the period from a month before Rosh Hashanah until the end of Sukkot. So the days that everybody is there, those are days when you hear it, and through that whole period. Okay, so I want to read you the first few verses of this especially, and see what you notice about this. The Lord is my light and my help. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom should I dread? When evil men assail me to devour my flesh, it is they my foes and my enemies who stumble and fall. Should an army besiege me, my heart would have no fear. Should war beset me, still would I be confident. Now, what's the author of this psalm saying so far?
That God is on his side.
God is on his side, and what else? Because he says this several times. He says, I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
Now, the first time I really studied this psalm, I looked at this and I thought, what do you think about somebody who keeps saying, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid? In 3 different ways, he says, I am not afraid.
They are
What's
trying
he
to
telling
convince, he's trying to convince himself that he's not afraid.
He really is a little bit afraid, right? I mean, this is not, Freudian science, right? He's a little bit afraid, but he's trying to convince himself that it's going to be okay, that God is with him, and therefore he doesn't have to be so afraid, right? But you don't want to read it like as if it were scripture and therefore it was infallible, right? It's the real experience of a person whose soul is troubled. So, continuing, one thing I ask of the Lord, only that do I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, to frequent his temple. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but if there were one thing I could ask of the Lord, it would not be to live at shul every single day of my life. Right?
Yeah, think.
And most of us are of a generation that remembers a song by Janis Joplin. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? Yeah. It's just one thing I need, right? A Mercedes Benz would be nice. Yeah. My friends all have Porsches. I must make amends. You're too young to know that song, Ashley.
What is she?
That's my music that I like. That's my
Okay.
classic vinyl
Well,
station on XM.
I stand corrected.
This is the first psalm that this says a psalm of David, and I've never really understood. Several of them are psalms of David. Does that mean that the traditional belief is that David wrote it, or I thought that was the whole Psalms?
Well, that is the traditional belief, although many Psalms, even in, that little introduction verse at the beginning attributes them to somebody else. But the fact that it says Le David or Mizmor Le David, a Psalm of David, it doesn't mean that King David wrote it. Right? What it means is maybe he commissioned a religious poem from someone in the court or someone outside the court even, right? Or someone wrote it and dedicated it to King David, maybe as a way of improving their favor in the court. Right? I know it sounds a little crass, but I mean, King David himself, having been a musician, he may have been a little bit of a patron of the arts, and having a spiritual side, according to many accounts, he may very well have commissioned religious poetry. And maybe that's why we have so many Psalms that are, they have his name in the initial line. Continuing, he will shelter me in his pavilion on an evil day, grant me the protection of his tent, raise me high upon a rock. Now is my head high over my enemies round about. I sacrifice in his tent with shouts of joy, singing and chanting a hymn to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Have mercy on me, answer me. In your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. O Lord, I seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not thrust aside your servant in anger. Maybe that's what he's really afraid of, right?
Being
You have
abandoned.
ever been my help. Do not forsake me. Do not abandon me, O God, my deliverer. Very poignant line here. Though my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will take me in. Show me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my watchful foes. Do not subject me to the will of my foes, for false witnesses and unjust accusers have appeared against me. Whoops. Had I not the assurance that I would enjoy the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. In other words, if it weren't for that, I would be in really big trouble. Look to the Lord. Be strong and of good courage. Oh, look to the Lord. Okay. Any other thoughts on this particular psalm? So here you have an example of someone who is afraid, but who, with the help of his religion, he's managing his fear. He's able to express confidence that he can face some difficult days ahead, right? And a lot of religious poetry, I think, is like that. And you find that in many of the Psalms. Okay? Other comments or questions before we go on?
I feel like the house of the Lord wasn't necessarily the shul, because
No.
he goes to talk about the pavilion and frequenting the temple. It was more of almost to live within the good graces of God.
Either that, or I think maybe in the temple, right? To be able, not necessarily to live there, but to be able to find the uplift that he gets from being in the temple. And, temple, let's face it, it was a cut above Beth Yeshurun, right? So that's, that's something to desire. Okay? But that line especially stays with me. If it would just one, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I know a rabbi who had a congregation in New England, and one Friday night started to snow, and
Often does, yeah.
it turned out nobody came to the synagogue that night. He was there. He was afraid he was going to be stuck there, right, because of the heavy snow. I will dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. But hopefully not that. Okay. I want to go to Psalm 121. Okay. So this is a psalm that you may have heard recited at funerals, because it's a psalm with the kind of spirit that suggests to people that when you're in a difficult moment, God is there with you. A song of ascents. Right? And that tells you it was probably a psalm composed for the temple itself. So that was after King David was alive.
So everything that says a psalm of ascent, you're saying may have been composed for, for the temple. And
Yes.
ascent would mean that when you're in the holy place, you're moving up.
Yes, and also there were stairs people climbed in the temple. There were supposedly 15 stairs in the initial temple, and there are 15 psalms that begin with this heading, Shir Lamalot.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the text. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your protection at your right hand. By day, the sun shall not strike you, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. He will guard your nephesh, your soul. Here he translates it as life. The Lord will guard your going and coming, now and forever. All right. So here you have a psalm that says very directly, God is with me. God is in control of things. God is with me. Whatever bad things there are that are going to come, from where will my help come? My help comes from God. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, so let's go to 122. Another song of ascents of David, which, clearly that's not entirely correct. Okay. I rejoiced when they said to me, we are going to the house of the Lord. Our feet stood inside your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem built up, a city knit together to which tribes would make pilgrimage, the tribes of the Lord, as was enjoined upon Israel, to praise the name of the Lord. There the thrones of judgment stood, thrones of the house of David. Pray for the well-being of Jerusalem. May those who love you be at peace. May there be well-being within your ramparts, peace in your citadels. For the sake of my kin and friends, I pray for your well-being. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I seek your good.
Well, this definitely, to me, when you said a song of ascents, may have been composed for the temple, this definitely sounds to me like something a priest might have said to the people who were, assembled around and listening to what was the religious customs of those days.
Yes.
And if it's of David, that kind of adds to my mind that the person who wrote this, and the person saying this, are looking to be connected to David, but his good things, because we all know he did some bad things too.
Yeah. Right. No, all of that, very good. What's another thing you notice about this psalm? What's the central word in this psalm?
Jerusalem?
Jerusalem. Right? Don't let anybody tell you that Jerusalem wasn't central to Jewish life 3,000 years ago. Jerusalem was a regular focus of prayer. There are a number of psalms, and we're going to see another one from a different perspective, really focused on Jerusalem. Right? That's where the tribes would make pilgrimage, right? Meaning that 3 times a year, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot, people would come from all over. all over Israel at least, to go to Jerusalem to make an offering in the temple, right? By the way, a lot of Christian friends of Israel quote this verse frequently. Pray for the well-being of Jerusalem, right? And so we do. And again, the house of the Lord our God, what's that? That's the temple, right? So all of this is about Jerusalem and how central Jerusalem is for the Jewish people. Okay. Next, unless anybody has any comments or questions, we'll go on to the next one. 137. Okay. This is just the opposite. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. Zion being another name for what?
Israel,
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Okay.
It's built on Mount Zion. Okay? There on the poplars, we hung up our lyres, for our captors asked us there for songs, our tormentors for amusement. Oh, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing a song of the Lord on alien soil? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue stick to my palate if I cease to think of you. If I do not keep Jerusalem in memory, even at my happiest hour. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they cried, strip her to her very foundations. Fair Babylon, you predator. A blessing on him who repays you in kind what you have inflicted on us. A blessing on him who seizes your babies and dashes them against the rocks. Well, isn't that a nice ending to a religious prayer? Wasn't that special?
Well, this concerns the Babylonian where they were evacuated to Babylonia, but there is I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Nelson DeMille. He's a big thriller writer, kind of spy thrillers.
Yeah.
And he has one book called By the Rivers of Babylon.
Yeah.
And the book involves it's modern day, like maybe the 80s or 90s, and there is a remnant of Jews living there who are living under Persian rule or Iraqi rule, I guess. And they're there, and they try and go in and get them, and they won't leave. And then there's other things going on that they had infiltrated Iraq, but it's a very interesting book. And whenever I see that psalm, I just think of the book. I don't think of the psalm, By the Rivers of Babylon, because it was interesting to me. I didn't realize there was a remnant Jewish community still hanging on there, even after Israel tried to evacuate everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, even after they were exiled from Jerusalem, Jerusalem remained central in Jewish thought and in Jewish practice. And after all, why do we break a glass at the end of a chuppah, at the end of a Jewish wedding? Right? Because of that line in the psalm. It says, if I don't put Jerusalem above my chiefest joy, well, what's more joyful than a wedding? It says, so, remember Jerusalem, and remember that even though it's your greatest day, maybe not for everybody. Right?
Well, it is one of the most famous psalms, I would say.
Yes. Although those last couple of lines often get edited out.
Well, they're there.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
No, I think, maybe a little better reading that way. So 145 is one that we say in synagogue every day, except that it usually has a couple of other psalms added to it, one of which it has a line that begins with the word ashrei, which means happy. Happy are those who live with you, God. Right? And this is the sense of this particular song. I will extol you, my God and King, and bless your name forever and ever. Every day will I bless you and praise your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and much acclaimed. His greatness cannot be fathomed. One generation shall laud your works to another and declare your mighty acts. I could go all the way through to the end, but I think you get the basic idea. This is straightforward praise of a God who is good, who is in control, who is one who loves us, and we love him. That's it. I will recount your greatness. God is this and that and good to all. And and we, your faithful ones, we appreciate it. We appreciate you, God, right? Et cetera, et cetera. There's only one real negative line in this. It's this one here, but all the wicked he will destroy. Yeah. And by the way, again, I caution you about accepting every line in the Psalms as if it were literally true, a literally true statement about God. Right? Because it doesn't always happen that way. I think there is something built into the universe that, evil burns itself out eventually. But it sure takes its bloody time sometimes. So anyway, maybe not. But even so, my mouth shall utter the praise of the Lord. Let all creatures bless his holy name forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Right? So again, you have this song. This psalm is a love song to God who is there for us, who is there for you, who is in control of the universe. Okay? And maybe the rabbis felt that, that's a good idea. Let's keep everybody focused on that. Let's have everybody every day say something to God about how grateful they are for all the things that God does for us. Could do worse, right? Okay, so a number of these Psalms do have an important role in the prayer book, and there are many others, but because there are 150 different Psalms, and we've already spent 40 minutes just on 6 of them, I think that's probably enough. Yes? Okay. So, Proverbs. Just to say a word about the book of Proverbs. It is, the kind of advice that a father gives to his son, or maybe today his daughter. And I want to just show you a sample of this from chapter 6. Okay. This is, religiously tinged, but also straightforward practical advice. For the commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, and the way to life is the rebuke that disciplines. Meaning, sometimes you have to rebuke your children because otherwise, how will they know to do better? Right? The commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, etc. It will keep you from an evil woman, from the smooth tongue of a forbidden woman. Do not lust for her beauty or let her captivate you with her eyes. The last loaf of bread will go for a harlot. A married woman will snare a person of honor. Can a man rake embers into his bosom without burning his clothes? Can a man walk on live coals without scorching his feet? It is the same with one who sleeps with his fellow's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. Okay, so pretty straightforward, not a lot of fancy language in the book of Proverbs. Some of it is, very well put, but it's good middle-age advice to youngsters or to people who haven't quite grown up yet. Right? That's the book of Proverbs. There are a few verses from Proverbs that are included in the prayer book. Otherwise, we never read anything from it in the synagogue. There's no special time to read Proverbs. Psalms, they're all over the prayer book. Sometimes as a whole psalm, sometimes a few verses or even one verse. Proverbs, not too often, here and there, but not too often. Okay? So I have to talk about the book of Job. Right? Job is like the book of Jonah. It's holy fiction. And in a short description of the premise of Job, I'll show you why it tells you that it's fiction. Right? So Job is the most righteous man in the universe. He does everything right. And God has showered him with reward. And, he has all kinds of wealth. He has 10 children. Kind of hard, right? So God says to the angels around him, you see my friend Job, what a good person. He's so wonderful. He brings me sacrifices all the time. He does what is right. He gives lots and lots of charity. He's a good man. And along comes the bad angel, also known as Satan, Satan, if you wish. Okay? And he says to God, well, why wouldn't he be good? You give him everything he could want. Let's take some of that stuff away from him. Take his possessions away. Take his children away. Then see how he talks about you, God. And God, who is like a fool in this instance, God says, okay, we'll try. We'll see how good Job is. And so along comes someone who says, all your possessions are gone. They were stolen by this wild group of bandits. And they killed everybody else. And I alone have survived to tell you. Right, that line there, that's the device that tells you that this book is fiction. Okay? And then another guy comes along from the other direction and says, the house collapsed on all 10 of your children, and they're all dead. And I alone survived to tell you. And Job's wife says to him, this is stupid. God has obviously got it in for you. Why don't you just go ahead and curse God and die? And Job says, you know what? The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Right? You've all heard that line, right? Right? We say that at funerals too. God gives us people into our life and then they go. Right? So God turns back to Satan and says, you see, Job really is righteous. Satan says, maybe. I have an idea. Let's see if he'll be so faithful to you if you give him a horrible disease and let him sit in pain for a while. So God says, all right, just don't kill him, right? I don't know why God would go along with this, but he does, right? That's also one reason why I think the book is fiction. God wouldn't do that, right? So Job comes down with this terrible, scaly skin disease, and he's sitting in the street, scraping his skin, and he's in pain, and there he sits, but he doesn't curse God. And 3 of his friends come to visit him, and they say the thing a friend should never say, which is, Job, what did you do to deserve this? Think, you must have done something. Again, never bring that line into a hospital room, okay? Right? You don't want to do that. And Job says, I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it is. Job is a lot more eloquent than that, but it's a long book, right? That's the premise. Why do these things happen? Why should something terrible happen to a good person like Job? Okay. And in the end of the book, God comes out of the whirlwind and says, first of all, you guys who were Job's friends, you're not his friends. You are not telling the truth, like my friend Job. You're not telling the truth at all. So here's my answer to you, Job. Where were you when I created the universe? God says a lot more than that. It's several chapters long, but that's God's answer. Where were you when I created the universe? In other words, there are certain questions that are unanswerable in this lifetime. And you shouldn't expect an answer from God, because no one gets an answer to that, right? You can take the answer that Rabbi Harold Kushner gave in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, which is because random things happen, because God is not in charge of everything in you. You think God, is in charge of crashing airplanes and who's on board that plane? That's not God. God is the one who is with us who mourn the people who suffer. God is with the people who suffer. But God isn't the one who does those things. Those things just happen. That's not quite what Job says. But what Job says is, I deserve an answer. And God says, you're right, you do, but you don't really get one. In this lifetime, you don't get to have one. And so for all of us who at one time or another ask that terrible question, why do such bad things happen to such good people? Know that that's one of the things you can't learn in any class. Right? Whether it's basic Jewish literacy or advanced, God 452, right? Graduate level studies about God. Still not going to get it. And that's the way it is. Now, does that mean that religion is not worthwhile? So I once heard a very smart man give an answer to that. He said, Judaism, both in its history and its practice, give us answers to maybe 80 or 90% of life's important questions. I trust God for the rest. And I've sort of adopted that as my own philosophy. I know that I can't answer every single question, but I trust God for the questions I can't answer. And I'll deal with it. Okay. Comments or questions up to here?
Again, I will say what I've said before, and that is the versions of the Bible that are taught to children and in Sunday religious school, and where, let's face it, that's where a lot of Jewish education ends, are quite different from what you are presenting to us. And what you are presenting to us has more of a sound of authenticity than I think the version you learn as a kid.
Well, there are two things I want to say about that. One is that as a kid, you don't even hear everything.
Right.
Okay. I was never taught the story of Job. You know, and I was told a lot of Bible stories, but even through 10th grade and confirmation in my synagogue, I was never told the story of Job. I heard about it because it was part of the Bible, it was part of the culture, right? You hear about the patience of Job, right?
Mhm.
And then, so if you want to understand the patience of Job, you have to know the story, the basics of the story of Job, right? So that's one thing. There are some things we're never taught as kids. And the other thing is, there are parts of the Bible that are either R-rated or X-rated.
Mhm.
And you shouldn't learn them when you're 10 or 11, right? You probably shouldn't learn them when you're 13. But this is why you have to keep learning. Because now there are things you may understand the basics of certain stories in the Bible at the age of 10 or 12 or 14. But when you relearn them as an adult, you get a whole new dimension of and a new understanding of what it means.
Well,
Yeah.
Rabbi, that's why Protestants have Wednesday night Bible study. And I really think that Jewish people should too, because I think there's an awful lot of us that just don't keep track of that. You
Mhm.
know, it's like, oh yeah, I learned it back in Sunday school, or yeah, if
Yeah.
you're a really bright guy, I learned it back in Hillel, but then it's past, it's in the past, unless you study Jewish studies as your major in college, that's it, you know?
Okay, so here's my answer to that, Sharon. If you come to synagogue regularly in the mornings, you will hear the entire Torah. You will hear selections, many of the most important selections from the prophets. If you come on all the holidays, you will eventually hear all 5 of the Megillot, which are the next things that I'm going to talk about, the next 5 books of the Bible. Right? If you take part in synagogue life, you will eventually get a lot of those things. Now, not all, right?
Yeah,
Because
but I
again,
still think there's a place for discussing it in small groups. I
and we
really do. I've always been jealous of people having their Bible studies on Wednesday.
Yeah.
I've
So,
always thought it was a
you
great
know,
idea.
I don't have a class on Wednesday night, but I'm
We're
teaching the
Tuesday
prophets
night,
on
yeah.
Sunday morning.
No, I
Right.
mean, that's what we're here doing, basically. It's
Yes.
adult study. And I really think that, you know, there's a lot of people that could benefit from it. It's just not part of our culture. And I don't know if it's part of the Catholic culture. That's why I said
I
Protestant.
would say, Sharon, it's not part of the culture of Beth Yeshurun, but it is part of Jewish culture.
Okay.
And one of our problems in conservative Judaism is that we have to reinvent Jewish learning for generations of people who didn't grow up with it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I mean, if I sit on a bus in Jerusalem, I will almost always see someone who has a book in front of them. And I don't just mean, like, fiction, right? Or some interesting nonfiction. I mean, either a book of Psalms, which they're reading for the umpteenth time, or a book of, commentaries on the Torah, or a book with essays about different biblical stories on different themes, right? It never fails. When I'm in Jerusalem, if I get on the bus or now the train, because they have a train in Jerusalem, there's always people who are learning because that's what Jews do. Now, in the generation where I grew up, do you think there were a lot of people in my hometown of Oklahoma City who were constantly learning Judaism like that? I think not.
Well, actually, in Galveston, they have Friday night services at the Temple B'nai Emmanuel.
B'nai
And
Israel,
then
yes.
but then on Saturday morning, they have, and get this, and they get chicken from like Popeyes or churches and eat it.
Mhm.
It's not kosher. I mean, that floored me because of the way I was brought up. I don't keep kosher at home, but if I'm in a synagogue, I want things to be kosher. But anyway, and then on Saturday morning, they have some kind of study. It's not formal synagogue unless there's a bar mitzvah, which with the small congregation is very infrequent. But they
Right.
do that in Galveston. I could
Yes.
never go.
So, to what I would say, kol hakavod, even if they're not having services, at least they're learning Torah, right?
Yeah, and
That's
people
what
really
Jews
enjoyed it.
should
I
do.
couldn't go because, having a retail business, Saturday was a big day. I had to be at the store
Well,
on Saturday.
that's Galveston for you, isn't it? I
Yeah,
remember when I came there in 1980, all the, the stores on Market Street.
yeah.
There was, all,
Strand, on the
Schreiber
Strand.
and Miller and Schwartz's and Drew's Furniture. They're all
Oh,
Jewish.
yeah,
houses.
yeah.
Oh, most of them.
They were,
anyway.
they were all gone by the time I got there because I started the bookstore in 99. So
Yes.
they were all gone,
Yes.
There was
Yeah.
post office
This
with little
was a different
antique-
generation before you got there.
Absolutely. And you had that mall out on 61st and Broadway, and it had a
Yes.
Craig's in it, which was owned by a Jewish family, and all sorts of stuff that's completely gone.
Yeah.
Do you remember that business?
I remember Galveston very well.
Yeah, it's a
So,
different story.
That's
But anyway,
where my two oldest girls were born.
mm,
Yeah.
they're BOIs. Wow.
I'm sorry?
They're BOIs born on the island.
Yes,
How
yes,
cool.
they are. And neither one of them really appreciates that title. Yeah. Of course, the second one was like 8 months old when we left. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that big a deal for her to be a BOI.
I do have a question, Rabbi.
Please.
I'm a little perturbed by Jacob fighting with this Archangel Gabriel, and then this story has Satan in it, and I'm like, who are these people? I mean, to me, the God up there is, super powerful, and there's no one else like him. Who are all these strange
By the way, there's
people
no
that come in?
Gabriel in the story of Jacob. there's this angel or person, we're not sure. Gabriel's not mentioned in that story. So
Oh,
just
okay, that's good.
FYI. But
Okay.
but I understand your point. You know, there are all these angels here and there in scripture. And what purpose do they serve? Well, apparently in the biblical mind, even God needs assistance. My reinterpretation of that is we are God's assistants. God depends on us to get certain things done in the world because that's the way God set the world up. God didn't, say, okay, you're now in the Garden of Eden, you're going to live there forever, and I'm going to take care of you and everything's going to be good. That's not how it worked out. Instead, God created a universe where there are things to be done. There are jobs to be finished. Who are the people who are going to finish those jobs? That's us. It's up to us to make the world what it needs to be. Heschel talks a lot about this notion because it's really a notion that goes back to Jewish mysticism. It's called the Tzorech Gavoa, or the divine need, right? That God needs human beings to finish the work of creation. Because after all, if God had created everything that needed to be created, well, what would be the point of creating human beings? And if human beings were just like, puppets, well, what kind of life is that? That's not the world God created either. If you sin, God's going to smack your hand, right? It's not the way it works, right? So life is about building the world in the way God intended for us to build it. And that's our job. And we have to be God's angels because we can't depend on an angel coming, right? We might get lucky, but sometimes an angel might arrive too late. So it's up to us not to be late. And with that thought, I'll leave you for tonight. I'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you all for being here. Ashley, thank you. All right.
Thank you,
See you
Good
then.
night,
And we'll
everyone.
finish the Bible next week. Promise. Good night.